You've just stepped into the Buzzy's Country Store podcast, part-time porch talk, part-time therapy session, and all heart. I'm Chief Larry, and along with your host, J. Scott Ridgell, we're serving up real stories with a Buzzy's twist.
Hello, welcome to the Buzzy Podcast. I'm Jay Scott. Larry's doing all the filming and editing, and today we're very pleased to have as our guest, Mr. Bob Mann. Bob, thank you very much for doing this.
Hey, no problem.
Get you up this early, bring you down here. Let's start with the picture. You
Okay.
brought me this picture a couple years ago, and you know I have shown this picture to different people who know you but don't know, they didn't grow up with you or anything. And guess what? Just about everybody can pick you out. I tell them, I said, can you pick Bob Mann out? And they go, boom. I guess that's a tribute to your boyish good looks. You retained them. In this picture is, what is it, about 25, 30 people?
Yeah.
And this was your sixth grade picture?
That's correct.
At
Lexington Park Elementary School.
And of the people here, do you see any of them still? I know Marlene. I worked with Marlene. And
Marlene's right there.
Yep. How about any of the others are they still around?
Yeah,
or
actually.
Are you still in touch with any of them?
Yeah, Stevie Gilrudd, his father owned the Jack and Ray's drugstore in Lexington Park. That's Stevie right there. And then a fellow from Ridge, Billy Wood, right there. And he's still around, and I think he's got a grass cutting service that I see the trucks every now and then. But I can...
Now, you went to Great Mills with Stevie, I know that.
And Marlene.
And Marlene, too.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is Rhoda Wetzel and Bonnie Weiner from the Weiner clan, the lawyers and stuff. And Anita Sachs, that was Ray Sachs' daughter. Yeah, from Jack and Ray's.
Uh-huh.
And Gene Davenport, his claim to fame was he was the best marble player in Lexington Park. And then a lot of the kids in the class actually came from the Navy base. Their parents were in the military, and I think this was Emily Pavlik. I think she was, and her father was killed on a Constellation crash up in Argentina, Argentia or something. I forget.
Was that here?
Yeah,
I mean,
she was here when this happened. Yeah. And but a lot of these people were, in fact, military kids. So they were here for 3-4 years, and then they'd leave. And
you probably experienced a lot of that there, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Like our class, we went through 1 through 8th grade, and we only had like 3 or 4 new kids come in.
Right.
You probably had half the class turned
all the
over.
time, yeah.
And I guess that was good. And as far as anytime we got a new kid in the class, it was kind of fun because, you know, we'd all been, the 20 of us had been together through the whole 8 years without any turnover.
And in fact, there were a lot of people like Marlene and Steve and a guy named Rhodey Rowe here and Jimmy Foster and some other people. We went through our whole careers at Great Mills and all.
So you did 12 years?
So there was a small group of contingents that were, hung together.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's still Marlene, Stevie, Billy.
Yep.
That's still around.
Yep.
Tell me about how you ended up in the PAX-10 program, because we had some boys at Riken. Did that change from PAX-10 to something else?
Yeah, it made a change back in, and I graduated in '67 from Great Mills, and at that time it was called the PAX Plan, and it had been the PAX Plan for probably 10 or 12 years at that point. And
explain that for the folks that there was a thing to get engineered.
It was like a co-op program that you'd get selected for the program, and you'd come in and you'd sign up with the University of Maryland. You'd be a University of Maryland student. They would have nighttime classes every semester, and including summer that we would take. Usually 3 classes during each of the normal semesters, and then 2 classes during the summer. And you did that for 3 years, and then you went up to the University of Maryland full-time for 2 years.
Ooh.
And
did you work That 3 years at PAX?
Yes, and while we were taking night classes, we were working a full 40-hour week
And getting paid.
and getting paid.
And was it a free ride as far as the schooling and tuition and all that?
No,
How did that-
we paid for our tuition, but in those days, tuition was $200 a semester or something. It wasn't much.
Right.
And they paid for our books, the program. And but the big deal was they gave you a steady job for,
Right. And so were the courses, who taught them? University of Maryland professors or teachers? Or,
some. They had a number of, I call them professors. They were engineers down at Pax River here that were working for the Navy that were certified instructors for the University of Maryland, and they would come in and do that. Like Ned Clark married Margaret Yateman, and he was one of my mechanics instructors down here.
Huh.
So we had a few local people.
What about all the electives as far as English and social studies? Did you have?
All of that. We had to take everything everybody else did at the University of
And
Maryland.
they would teach that here, or did you have to get
No.
that up there the last 2 years?
We got most of it down here. We had our philosophies and English and histories and all that kind of stuff.
So what was that degree? What was that?
A degree in engineering.
Engineering. Okay.
Yeah, and you could pick either aerospace engineering, electrical engineering, or mechanical engineering.
And then at the end of that, did you get to pick where you wanted to work, or so you automatically at PAX?
Well, not exactly. Throughout the years when I was working on the base, they would you could request to go to a different place, and if they had an opening and were willing to take you, they would take you. I transferred a couple of times while I was working at PAX to different places. And like I ended up at the Ordnance Branch. And when I graduated from Maryland, I came back right to the Ordnance Branch and started working there.
But different places, meaning here at PAX.
Yeah.
Could you have gone to Fallon or somewhere else
Yes.
if you wanted?
Yes, you could. If you were just a government employee and you're allowed to do transfers if they would like you to.
Do they don't do that now? Do they?
Yeah, nothing's really changed with that. You can.
With the program?
Well, the program changed. I guess about 3 years after I graduated, they decided they wanted to do the PAX 10 plan. And what it was called PAX 10 plan was, instead of using the University of Maryland as the prime educational center, they used the University of Tennessee.
Right.
And but some of the people didn't want to go all the way down to Tennessee
For 2 years.
for 2 years, so they could still pick University of Maryland. A lot of people ended up using Virginia Tech.
Oh, we have a lot of techers around here.
There was a lot. I used to go on recruiting trips for the base, and Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Duke, all those we used to go to.
Looking for engineers.
Yeah, looking for engineers.
Yeah. So I'm doing the math, 67 and 6 years, 73.
72.
72.
I did 5 years.
Put you back here.
Yeah, a lot of guys took an extra semester because it was, even though it was only 3 classes per semester while we were down here at night school, but it was night school, so you had to work a 40-hour week.
Yeah.
And then do your homework, and it was quite a task, and a lot of people kind of decided to stretch it out for another year. Like Danny McCoy, who lived right behind you here. He and I graduated together, but he was in the class ahead of me. But
He and Paul O'Brien.
yeah, Paulie was in my class. Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, so
it's funny. I had heard that there were 2 plans. There was the PAX plan,
Right.
But I didn't know about the PAX 10. But nothing of that now, as far as
I don't think they do that now.
Yeah.
They have a co-op program now, and that's about all I know about it. That I haven't been involved for about 10 years, 12
you
years.
retired. We'll get to that. But what year did you retire? We'll start at the end and go.
The government. I retired in 2002. I was 52 years old. I couldn't take it anymore. The government at that point had gotten so, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was, I spent most of my time making sure that everybody had their sexual harassment training and things like that. And I'll be honest with you, it was there was a lot of hate and discontent on the base, and a lot of it was aimed at me, although I had nothing to do with it.
Well,
and I had a lot of people working for me at the range. It was one of the biggest divisions on the base.
That's right. You had, what, 100 some?
There were probably, if I counted all of the full-time contractors and the other subdivisions, we had about 500 people, I'd say. So it was big.
And how did you get, when you went and worked, you worked your way up, obviously. How did you get that position as far as the head of, what was it called, test?
No, it was the Atlantic Test Range, Chesapeake Test Range is the traditional old name. Well, actually, when I started, I worked at the Shielded Hangar. That was as the student trainee co-op thing. And I started transferring to places. I actually started transferring to places where I could fly more because I really got into the flying at PAX, and I loved it. So I ended up moving to the Ordnance Branch, and I was flying every week, in something, in everything. And they finally kind of stopped me from flying about 1985 or 6, somewhere in there. And because I'd moved into some other jobs, and they were moving me towards management, and they didn't want the management guys flying anymore.
Oh.
So they didn't want me flying anymore. But so I ended up going down to the Targets Division, which a lot of the boys that come down here worked at the Targets Division, the boathouse and all. And I became the head of that, which I really didn't want because I didn't want a management job anymore. I just wanted to work, and I wanted to drive boats and whatever. But that ended real quick when Les Ryan retired, and they put me in his place. Then I ended up, our chief engineer at the test range, which was the Targets Division, fell under the Chesapeake Test Range. The chief engineer, a guy named Rich Pace, moved to a kind of a training position up at the Pentagon. And when he moved out, they asked me to go fill for him as the chief engineer of the test range, and that was probably one of the best jobs I ever had. I wasn't in charge of hardly anything except technology and what we were doing and all, and I didn't really have any people working for me.
Yeah.
So that was a good job. But then a couple of years later, Joe Hogue, Dr. Hogue, came into my office. We'd had a little bit of a problem with not problems, but we just had some issues come up, and they were moving people around, and they told me, Joe Hogue told, we want you to be the head of the range. And I said, I don't want it. I said, I like the chief engineer's job. And he said, no, you are now the head of the range. And I said, well, Joe, I'm not going to apply for it. He said, it's done.
Doesn't matter.
That was the first time I ever heard that you didn't have to apply for one of those big jobs, like that. So they made me the head of the range there.
What year was that?
That was somewhere in the early 90s.
Whoa! So till 2002,
I was at the range for about 10 years, and but I was the head of the range for maybe 6 years or something. It's all a blur at this point. But,
isn't that funny? Just quick aside, but I think back on working on the base, it's like a dream, or like something that I did but I don't remember, or it's just like a whole nother lifetime.
I think what happens is you tend to remember the things that excited you or were fun things. I think about all the flying I used to do. I've got about 500 flight hours on
now.
The base.
Let's talk. I got the. I'm going to put the helmet.
Okay.
The catfish.
Yeah.
How did you get to? Can you tell the story?
Yeah. Well, I started flying with a few things. My first flight was in the Cobra helicopter.
Ooh.
That was neat, and I didn't know I was going to get that. But I was partying with a bunch of the pilots who lived down the road from me, and one of the pilots there was the program manager for the Cobra helicopter. That was the first Cobra, the G model. And while we were sitting there drinking, he said, listen, I got a flight in a couple of days. How would you like to go up and take it for a spin? I said, sounds good to me. So he took me up in the Cobra, and I loved that. That was fantastic.
Now, was this like a good buddy deal, or was this like through the range, through the work? Was this a work?
No,
flight? Were you getting paid when you were up there flying?
I got my normal salary, but it was just he said he had an open seat and went, and my bosses kind of let me do it. So I went up and flew for about 2 hours with the Cobra, and then that set it off. And then I started flying in a lot more things, and I just loved it. And it got to the point where they would call me from the ops department at WST, Weapon Systems Test. They'd call me when they needed somebody to fly in the A6, for instance. In the A6, you sit side by side, and they need somebody in the what they call the BN, the Bombardier Navigator seat, because all the navigation equipment is on that side, and you need somebody to push buttons. So I learned how to do all that, and so I started flying all the time. And then I started flying in weapon separation flights and doing crazy things like engine stalls and stuff like that. And I'd done it so much. And then they canceled, by the way. They canceled all the civilians from flying. And all my friends, the pilots, went and said, listen, we got to have Bob still fly. Although it was kind of a friendly thing that they were doing for me. Probably not really necessary, but...
Well, what was the civilian kibosh? Was that just out of safety, or?
There was safety was becoming very important at that time, and we were losing a lot of people. There were a lot of crashes and stuff.
Yeah, I remember that period.
Yeah, back in the late '60s, early '70s, it wasn't uncommon to lose 2 or 3 airplanes a year.
Yes.
And so they decided they didn't want civilians to fly. Well, they went to bat for me and said, "Hey, he's doing a lot of stuff. He's taking photographs for us, in the airplane. He's running the instrumentation. He runs the nav systems, all that. And we don't have a lot of NFOs." So they said, can we let Bob still fly? And the captain relented. Wow. I can't remember which captain it was over there, but he said, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll let Bob Mann fly, but he's got to start taking NATOPS exams.
I was getting ready to ask you.
They have books there about this thick, and it goes through everything on the airplane: hydraulic systems, safety systems, electrical systems, in case you have problems and all. And they said that if I would take the NATOPS exams, every 6 months or whatever, they would let me go. But they said I could only pick 3 airplanes. They didn't want me spread across the board, because the more airplanes you're in, the less you know about each of them. So, so I picked A6, F4, and OV-10.
Wow.
Nice airplane. But
now, so how'd you get the catfish?
Okay. There's a rule that you don't pick your own call sign.
Oh.
Okay. And up to that point, well, let me just go back. Do you remember Top Gun? The second Top Gun. They had a guy that was flying in the back seat of the F-18, and they were going around the room asking everybody what their call signs was. And he said, Bob. And I said, wait a minute, you got to have a real call sign. He said, no, Bob, just Bob. Well, that was me, Bob. I was call sign Bob, until one day we had a big party going on down at Abel's Wharf, water skiing.
Oh, yeah.
And the Captain Don Richmond, who was the head of the Rotary Wing Division, and I used to fly with them a little bit too, he was down there and saw me laying with a beer in my hand, laying in a mud puddle where the waves were crashing and filled this mud puddle. And he said, you look like an old catfish wallowing around in a mud puddle. So that became my call sign, Catfish.
Be careful what nicknames, right? Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. No, that wasn't bad.
No.
There are some that could be really
well, that's
bad.
why I was debating whether or not to ask
Yeah.
you.
No, that's how I got it. Captain Richmond gave me that.
You look like an old catfish.
Yeah, but anyway.
Well, yours is. Do you know that Tommy Blazer's given me his fire helmet? That
Yeah,
he wore?
I saw that.
So now we've doubled the number of helmets here. But you were the first one.
Yeah, and the reason that you got the helmet is when I was flying, I resisted the temptation to get the new helmets and all. I probably should have, because they were custom fit and all that stuff. Uh-huh. And I was flying enough where they told me I could have one, and I said, no, I like my old helmet. So I just kept that helmet for a lot of years. And when I finally gave up flying and turned all my gear in, the guy in the paraloft said, I don't want this helmet. We're going to throw it away. This is too old. It's not. So he said, here, take it. So I got to keep it.
Well, I'm very honored to have it as a place of honor here at Buzzy's.
Yeah, it's been in a lot of airplanes with me. And by the way, I did get one F-14 ride before they had the accident, the flat spin on the base, and then they told me I couldn't fly in that anymore. But and it turned out that was the compressor stall airplane that, like the Top Gun that spun. Mm-hmm. That's what we were doing. We were doing compressor stalls to try to figure out. We were taking instrumentation in the airplane to measure all the parameters of fuel flow, air temperature, angle of attack, all that stuff to figure out what it was that was causing those engines to have compressor stalls. And in one case, they had an engine blow up. So we were out doing that, and that was kind of fun. We got up real high and did a few little, not full-fledged spins, but,
wow,
spinning down and stuff. But,
remember who the pilot was?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he, just about, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, we had a funeral here for Bob Randall, who was an F-4 pilot, and he was a prisoner of war.
Yep.
And the guy that flew me, Buddy Weber, became an attorney in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he showed up at the thing. He was in the squadron with Bob when Bob got shot down, and he came up here, and we had a good time talking about stuff.
You hadn't talked to him since?
I hadn't talked to him since he left back in probably 75, because I flew in one of the first test airplanes of the F-14 program, so this was before they were in the fleet.
Right. Hey, you just reminded me, your dad's report with Lovell in here.
Yeah.
As the test pilot for the project. And this was 1959. So Lovell was one of the Apollo 8.
He was in the first Apollo to go around the moon. Mm-hmm. Didn't land. And then he was scheduled to go in Apollo 13, which was supposed to land, but that's the one that had the fuel cell blow up.
Oh,
and they were losing oxygen, and they decided to continue around the moon and come back with almost no energy.
Talk a little about that whole test pilot, how that came to be at PAX, and remember the Tom Wolfe
sure.
Right Stuff?
The Right Stuff, that was kind of, we all loved the Right Stuff, but movie. But if you looked at the Right Stuff, most people thought all the test pilots and all the astronauts came from Edwards Air Force Base. Not so. The first 4 of 7 in the seven that came up, 4 of them were Navy pilots and then Marine Corps pilots. John Glenn, Shepard, all those guys, and they all worked at Pax River.
Yeah.
And then the second group, which was Jim Lovell, same thing. It turned out, I think there was more pilots coming from our test pilot school in Pax River than came from Edwards, which was built up as the place to go for all that.
Right.
And Jim Lovell was, like I said, he was in 1959. He got out of the test pilot school and was issued to the electronics test division, and that's where my father works. And he was one of the pilots that worked on projects with my dad. And my dad just had this report. Now, this was kind of a simple report. It was formation lights or
simple.
something.
I tried to read it and still don't know what. I might have to get you to explain it to me what they were testing.
But anyway, there was a lot of the astronauts were at Pax River.
Yeah.
And then even later life, when I told you I was at a party where I met that guy. I was at a party with a guy named Dave Griggs. Dave Griggs became the chief test pilot for the Space Shuttle simulator back in the early days of it was before the Space Shuttle. Huh. And he ended up becoming an astronaut and went up in the Space Shuttle on a cup. He was scheduled to go the second time, but he got killed in a plane crash in Arkansas, I think, in about 1979. 89, something like that. I can't remember exactly when it was, but he got killed in a plane crash. And
Now he went through TPS and all.
oh yeah,
through here.
yeah, he was at Pax River for a number of years.
Was your dad in the service? Is that
Yes,
how,
he was, and that's how we kind of got here. My dad was in the Army Air Corps.
Oh yeah,
in World War II.
So was Buzzy.
Yeah, and I always thought my dad joined right after Pearl Harbor went. That's when most people joined up and all. Turned out my dad joined in. That was 41. December of 41 is when Pearl Harbor happened. My dad joined in 1940, June of 1940. So he had already been in for a year and a half when Pearl Harbor happened. So he ended up getting into the engineering world, and when Pearl Harbor happened and everybody, he got immediately promoted. They didn't have a lot of people, qualified people that were there, and he ended up going to be a cadet training commander up at West Point. So he was there for a while, and he bounced around in engineering jobs in the country, and married my mother down Lovefield, Texas, in 1945, and then in 40, and then when the war was over, they went back home up to upstate New York, and there was no jobs for anybody. I mean, the place was devastated. And a friend of his had stumbled across Pax River, which was just now opening and really going to town. And he said, "You get your butt down here because
there's work.
They'll hire you." And that's exactly what happened. He came down for an interview. They hired him immediately because his airplanes was his forte.
Sure.
And he was here in 46. And my sister was born, the year before they came down. But that's how my dad got here.
Gotcha.
In 46.
Gotcha. Well, had he gotten out of the service?
Yes.
He'd gotten out of the service,
Yes.
so he came as a civilian.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So that's how my family got here.
I got you.
And my mother when my mother and my sister got there, they were living in a little teardrop camper, little tiny camper it's almost a joke. And one day Dad comes home from work and Mom's gone with notes on it saying, "I'm going home to Mama.
I'm out of here.
And you better get me a real house or I'm not coming back."
Well, that's all that housing, right?
Yeah, so
what do you call it, Cedar Gardens?
My dad ended up taking extra jobs building people's cars, rebuilding automobiles and stuff for people so he could have enough money to buy one of those duplexes in the flat tops.
Flat tops.
And we lived on East Rennell. And I still know a lot of people that lived around us. Ray Cyrus and Ray Cameron and all were friends living in that area. But that's where we lived, is in East Rennell.
I think Art Shepard, when they redid that, one of his old places is still there.
Yes.
They saved.
Yes. They saved one place.
I said, "Did you manage that, Art? Is that?"
But at the time, that was good living.
Oh, my mom told me that she had some friends there that they would go, and she said it was like a part that, the people were outside. She said it was very festive and fun. It was.
And everybody knew everybody else in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I remember I remember as a 3-year-old walking around the neighborhood, and my mother would call somebody and say, "Hey, Bobby's coming up there. Can you stop him? He wants to go to the drugstore. Can you stop him and pull him off the road?"
Head him off at the pass.
Yeah, so they'd head me off the pass, say, "Hey, Bobby, you want some cookies?" So I'd go in and eat cookies, and then Mom would come over and pick me up and bring me back. But it was unbelievable.
Well, that was supposed to be temporary housing, wasn't
Yeah.
it? And then out at Midway Drive,
Patuxent Patuxent Park was the big,
like the first planned development in the country, if you think about it.
And we moved there when I was 4 years old on Midway Drive. And lived right down from Charlie Sims and Marlene McLaren lived on Yorktown.
Marlene's still there.
Yeah, I know. Same house.
Same house.
Yeah.
What was that, Ranger?
She lived on Essex.
Essex. They were all named
Stevie
after
Gilrod and Anita Sachs. The Saxes and Gilrods had their fancy houses in Patuxent Park there. So anyway, so it was.
I've got Charlie's scrapbook. He gave it to me. It's an overview picture of that, and a bunch of them were in here one Sunday afternoon, and they were all picking out Remember, you might have been here even. They were going, and there was even a car that they identified. Look at that. Remember the Stockwells had that station or something like that. That was funny.
Yeah.
That was funny. All right, well, I don't want to end on I was going to end it when you were talking about Griggs dying. I said I'm not going to let him end on a bad note like that. Let's talk about something good, and we'll and I don't want to talk about, like, it sounds like you went out sort of with in 2002 you had enough and just said,
yeah,
to hell with it.
And kinda. I mean,
Yeah.
I still liked all the people and stuff like that. It's just it was really dragging me down a little bit, and I decided it was time to do something else, and I went to work for a contractor.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
DynCorp, and then it turned into CSC.
Oh, okay.
And I worked for them for like 10 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right,
And,
so 202 to 212.
Right.
All right, we're going to stop at 212, and we'll do part 2 with Brother Tommy.
Okay.
How's that?
This is Chief Larry, and if you're enjoying Jay Scott and the Buzzy's Country Store podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, you're always welcomed here at Buzzy's.